I'd made more credits than any man had a right to, and it was time to take a break from the racket. Bounty hunting is hard. Hard on the soul. Hard on the flesh. So I'd put my Andromeda gunship into hiding and made my way to New Babbage on Microtech, where I picked up my Mercury Star Runner. Galaxy is a big place, and it can be a beautiful place, and it was time to take a break and do some exploring. The Star Runner is a good ship to do exploring in. It's fast, it's powerful. When landing, its balance is more centered than Constellations. Now don't get me wrong, in a fight I'd rather be in a Constellation than an MSR any day of the week. But for moving gear and getting around fast, and for comfort, it's hard to beat a Star Runner. So I kept her on ice at the Space Center in New Babbage until I was ready for her, along with the various ground vehicles I had picked up along the way. Strangely though, the New Babbage Space Center has a policy that you can't load ground ships onto a starship from in the Space Center. So despite the freezing cold that is typical of a summer day in Microtech, I had to fly the Star Runner out to grounds just beyond the Space Center where I'd park the vehicles for quick retrieval. Now most of the tourists who come to Stanton want to see Horizon over on Crusader, and they might like to ski the slopes on the resorts just outside of New Babbage. But for me, I've been there, done that, never was the type to be drawn to the tourist attractions, so I wanted to get someplace far away, someplace where tourists don't go, someplace so wicked, even criminals don't go, someplace I'd have all to myself. And Stanton has a lot to see, and a lot in the way of places like that. But among the most remote is a place some might call a cold hell, a moon called Euterpe. Utherp is the farthest moon from Microtech. It's a rocky moon with a deep iron nickel core, a lot like a terrestrial planet. And long ago, in the time of the formation of Stanton, had things gone a little differently, Utherp might well have been a planet in its own right, but it's too small. Its gravity is only about 1/4 of a G. So I guess if it was orbiting Stanton on its own, it might qualify for a small planet, but it's not. It's orbiting Microtech, and that makes it just a big moon, but an interesting moon. A wild, cold, inhospitable place. Back on ancient Earth, there were freezing places on the planet in the north and the south especially on a continent called Antarctica. But the coldest night in Antarctica can't touch a day in Euterpe. The galactic travel guides say that Euterpe is uninhabitable. Well, that may be when it comes to people, but when it comes to other things, don't you believe it. Euterpe has life, you can tell because it has an oxygen atmosphere, as well as carbon dioxide, both are signs of respiration. It has its own strange cold-loving plants, a micro-ecosystem of small animals, organisms that are cognates of bacteria and protozoa, somehow all able to survive the extreme cold of a moon that could freeze a man to death even in medium Arctic armor with 2 hours of exposure. And that's not all, but we'll get to that when we get there. Sun's going down over Microtech, and I want to just take a moment to enjoy the beauty. On ancient Earth, there were creatures, now myth, but some say they were once real. In North America, known as Sasquatch. In Asia, known as Yeti. And it's said Euterpe has its own things, like its protozoa and algae, different from that of Earth. Cognates, not products of Microtech's unbridled playing God with genetic engineering and terraforming. things indigenous to that cold moon. But, strangely just like Earth, nobody's ever seen them. At least, no one who's ever lived to tell. But the explorers of Utherp report in the mountains and the deepest wild places, sometimes hearing high, wild cries and low-pitched rumbles, so powerful they roll across the landscape like thunder, or screech like the yells of some flying cacophonous demon. I don't know. Maybe. In my travels, I've seen some weird things, like the hellish moon Aberdeen, where those who die in caves are not to be found again if they are not retrieved before dark. There's almost no settlement on Euterpe. Strange, isn't it? Microtech is far and away the most technologically advanced planet in the Stanton system. Hell, for that matter, Microtech is one of the most technologically advanced planets in the Empire. And yet, each of its 3 moons is an almost untouched wilderness, but none so wild as Euterpe. It may well be the loneliest place in the entire system. Some have said that it's even lonelier and less hospitable than the remotest and unfriendliest worlds to be found in the Pyro system. But I don't mind. I have weapons, I have supplies, I have a good ship, and Utherp just seems like a good place to get away. Gotta admit though, it's beautiful. Look at it. In a way, Utherp is a tragic loss of an opportunity by nature itself. The moon is covered in frozen oceans of water. Now there's liquid water to be found in the caves on Utherp and deep at the bottom of the oceans, made liquid partly by pressure and partly due to geothermal activity. And that liquid water forms the basis of Utherp's ecosystem. But this is a moon that missed its chance. It could have been alive as ancient Earth. Instead, Utherp is fundamentally an orbiting glacier. I'm going to thrust ahead to full 100%, and we're going to aim to set down in that mountain range. We'll be near but not at one of Utherp's largest oceans. But I want to get there in what is effectively early in the day for Utherp, because the legends of this little world say you don't want to be out by night. Daytime temperatures can drop well below 100 degrees below 0 centigrade, and by night almost 100 degrees lower. That's only about 80 degrees above absolute zero. And the cold, given a bit of time, would surely kill you. But those things I told you about, those things that the explorers whisper about and keep the Microtech prospectors away, that perhaps keep Utherp wild, they say you don't want to be out at night on Utherp because of those things. Utherp is home to vast fields of these strange stalagmites. Children of Microtech call them fairy spires. They are so abundant all around the planet that we need to find places to avoid hitting them when we set down. An MSR is a good ship, but it does settle low to the ground. And the lower turret, by the time the ship is settled on its landing struts, sits barely half a meter over the terrain. So to land this big ship, we need someplace wide and flat. But I'm sure we'll find it soon, and at least we'll be settling down somewhere near dawn, giving us lots of time to explore this beautiful wild terrain. For this is the Euterpean highland country. There's caves in those mountains, and we're going to avoid those for now. What we really want to see in this landscape is Euterpe's famous floating rocks. For a little moon, Utherp has an extremely strong magnetic field, and the unusual volcanic forces that formed Utherp have led to the formation of many naturally superconductive magnetic rocks on its surface, and they float as if defying gravity. One can find them especially on the black rocky ground in the high country. Once we get the ship settled in, we'll take the armored ATV and go visit them. The weather seems good, and this seems as good a time as any to head out. It's rockier here than I would have liked, so I'm going to take a secret exit out the cockpit. Normally it would be too high to jump, but in the low gravity of Euterpe, only about a quarter of a G, it's safe enough. But I need to walk the ship from bow to stern and make sure she hasn't taken any damage on the underside. And before I risk attempting to climb up the ramp or bring any equipment down it, I need to make sure it's touched down on the ground safely as well. For all the MSR's strengths, I think it was designed by an urbanite who always anticipated this ship being landed on a pad, or perhaps on gentler terrain such as the soft soil of terrestrial worlds or sandier desert landscapes. They never anticipated a place like Utherp, that's for sure. But the underside of the ship looks good, at least insofar as I can see. Damn, it's cold. Minus 117 degrees Celsius. Even in medium battle armor, that would kill me in maybe an hour. A lot less than that if I were foolish enough to stand in the wind. Looking forward to getting back inside the ship. And I've only been outside for a minute or two. We'll be taking out the Ursa rover. In fact, of necessity on Euterpe, mostly what we'll be using is the Ursa rover. The ground vehicle is fully enclosed with life support systems, and I'll need them. Plan is to go exploring 30 or 40 kilometers from the ship, but in this kind of cold, I honestly wouldn't last an hour. And Utherp is prone to sudden storms. It can become calm like it is right now, and in moments, a storm can begin. With wind chills so steep, it would cause death by freezing in less than a minute without the benefit of armor. But even with armor, I might last 15 minutes. The Ursa rover is an absolute necessity. It's so wild here though, I was almost tempted to just drive away and save myself a walk through the cold and leave the disembarkation ramp down. But with the rumors around here, there's no way, and besides, if life has taught me anything, you can never be too careful. I'm going to close the ship up and lock her up. One of the strange things about Euterpe is, despite its low gravity, its atmosphere is really thick. That's partly due to the cold, and partly due to the extremely strong magnetic field that surrounds the planet, which, over the billions of years of this moon's existence, does not allow any of the atmosphere to escape. So over time, as volcanic gases have vented atmosphere into the sky, the atmosphere is just built up, becoming thicker and thicker. The atmosphere is about 20% oxygen, under 1% carbon dioxide, with inert gases. Technically, it's breathable, but it's so cold you'd freeze your lungs if you tried to take a breath. Even on Euterpe, despite the breathable atmosphere, you have to keep your helmet on. Alright, we're back in the Ursa rover. We're going to head up to the high country off to the left and see if we can find some of those famous floating superconductive rocks. They honestly are, from what I hear, very common here, and should not be at all hard to find. The Ursa rover weighs almost 11 metric tons, and in conditions on other worlds, it's a very solid vessel. It's still a solid vessel, but in this very low gravity, I have to remember to keep my speed down, because here, it only weighs 1/4 of that. This gives the vehicle a lot more thrust-to-weight ratio than I'm used to, and if I make a mistake and hit one of those larger rocks, with a little too much force, I could easily roll the rover. The rover's pretty darn tough, and it probably would survive just fine, but the last thing I can afford in a place like this is to get stuck out here, especially any more than a half-hour walk back from the ship. There they are. I can already see some of the floating magnetic rocks, and we have some of the strange fairy spires here too. They're not as big or dramatic as some that I've seen in books, but still, definitely interesting. There's an interesting story behind the geology of those spires. The rock is extraordinarily light, lighter than it should be. Well, that's not exactly accurate. The rock is, actually it weighs what rock would, if this moon didn't have a core of natural superconductive material, giving it an extremely powerful magnetic field. And that same material, in counterpolarity, is found in veins within the spires. So when they were forming, as wind created natural erosion, the rocks rose up, and in the dense atmosphere, the wind was a little faster higher up than lower, causing just a bit more erosion at the top than down below, thus forming the natural spires. This is just amazing. It's like looking at magic. Kind of brings the kid back in you. I mean, you see these stones, a couple of these stones right in front of me weigh as much as me with the armor and the weapons and the pack. And they're just floating. And you would think they would fly away in the wind, but they don't, because not only does the magnetic force hold them above the ground, but it holds them in place. Just amazing stuff. But Utherp is giving Euterpe weather again. And I can't stay out in this stuff for more than about 10 or 15 minutes at a time, not without risking frostbite. And we've already blown a couple hours getting up this hillside, and the days on Utherp are only 12 hours long. So I want to get moving and see if I can get to the far side of the crater valley that we flew over on the way here. Just looked like a beautiful place, you know? We're only aiming to travel about 30 kilometers, but like I said, the ground is so rocky that I have to keep the speed down. The rover is bouncy enough going over just these small stones, and if I should hit a big rock with a little too much speed, I could easily roll the rover. It's not that hard to remember not to press down far on the accelerator. The problem is, the rover itself is made out of magnetic materials, and I leave one magnetic line and enter another, which causes the rover to occasionally surge forward, giving me just a bit more speed than what is going to be safe, especially going up and down this high country. And anytime the wind gets behind me, it gives me an additional push. And the wind in particular, if the wind gets behind me, I can accelerate pretty quickly without even realizing I'm doing it. Alright, there's the valley, surrounded on all sides by the high country. That's called a hollow. And a deep depression down there leads me to believe that this hollow was created long ago by an impact crater. Or it could be an old volcanic crater. Euterpe is riddled with volcanoes and volcanic tubes and caves. There's no way for me to know. I'm not here to do geology, just sightsee, but it's interesting, you know? And right there, we got a little bit too much speed, sucked ahead by a magnetic line. If I'd hit that any harder, we could have flown 20, 30 meters before we touched the ground again, and who knows if we'd have rolled. It really would not be a good idea to roll. The rover feels so light right now. It's like driving a compact car, or more like a quad ATV. I'm glad it has 6 tires and they're as wide as what they are, but even then, in terrain like this with a slow gravity, it's barely enough. Well, it took over an hour, but we made it to the far side of that crater, and hey, we're still in one piece, so that's good news. Look at this country. This is beautiful. I mean, it's harsh, it's rugged, but this is country that is too wild. You wouldn't find the hardest untamed pirate here. You wouldn't find the most secretive smuggler. The only person crazy enough to be here right now, I guess, is me. But there's something special in that, you know. There's something beautiful in the loneliness of this place. Enough I'm willing to venture a minus 140 degrees in a windstorm to get a better view. That was cold, but so worth it. But I need to get back in the rover fast before I freeze to death. I have to be only 2 or 3 degrees from hypothermic now. If it wasn't for the suit, I'd have lost fingers and toes. The suit keeps my heat distributed fairly well, but The cold is simply overwhelming the suit. Warmth. What the hell was that? I think it's time to go. Folklorists and Microtech talk about the things that growl in the wilderness. Nobody knows what they are. Nobody's ever seen them. All anybody does know is that occasionally an expedition goes missing. And twice, not only did an expedition go missing, but the rovers that were carrying them were found simply torn to pieces. Now those were expedition grade rovers, and this is an armored rover, and it has weapons. Still, I don't think I want to risk it. What I have on the Ursa isn't exactly heavy weapons, and it's armored, yeah, but not like a tank. I'm going to trust in speed and head back to the MSR. The MSR is a heavy ship. We'll be safe enough there. I think I went faster than I should have. It only took me about 2/3 the time to get back. But there's nothing approaching on the scope, though the scope wouldn't pick up something organic all that well anyway. But after I got out of the immediate vicinity of the area where I heard the growl, I parked and popped over to the turret pod and took a look around. I saw something moving on the high ridges, several kilometers behind me, but I think I'm safe enough now. Honest to God, though, I wish I didn't have to get out of the rover and open up the disembarkation ramp. Or I wish they made a remote for these things. I got a gun, and I'm close to the ship, and I gotta just hang on to that. After that noise, I really don't like how you can't see anything through the mist. The mist gets, well, under a quarter kilometer away. Something could cover that distance to the rover in no time. I had to sit back down and get all the doors closed up and get back on the MSR fast. The MSR has a big cargo bay, and it's a tight squeeze getting a rover in, along with the Drake Dragonfly. But I've done this plenty now and have lots of experience, so it goes pretty fast, which, all things considered, I'm kind of glad for that right now. Feels good to be back in the ship too. I've been in space so long, ships tend to feel more like home than home, you know what I mean? Should seal the vessel up, especially given what I heard out there, but there's something. I just never been able to leave a mystery alone, you know. I mean, look at that place. Something wild and unknown. In Stanton, one of the most industrialized star systems in the entire empire. I'm just speechless. Alright, I'm in ship secure. And yeah, there is definitely something out there. Utherp, I think you're a more interesting place than anybody thought. Certainly more than I thought. I thought the legends were just legends. But now that I've wrapped my head around the reality that something is out there, I think it's time to do more exploring. Who knows? Maybe I'll just discover what it was. But for now, nightfall is just around the corner. Temperatures will drop to 160 below, maybe 200 below. Curious as I am, there's no going back out there, not after dark. It would be a fool's quest for one. Even a vehicle like the rover might seize up in that kind of cold. I'm going to be safe enough in the ship though. She's well armored and the motion sensors will let me know if anything gets close. For now, after that dead cold, I am starving and tired. And cold air is dry, you know. I, honest to God, could drink a pub on my own. It's time for a break and some dinner. But first, some liquid. And some time to think. I mean, there's something unknown out there. Just, wow. Know what I always wanted to be? Never wanted to be a bounty hunter. Always wanted to be an explorer and, well, all of a sudden, I feel like an explorer. And the sun might be getting low, but I think I'm going to take my drink and go enjoy a view like no other.